Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope you are all doing well, and welcome to this early morning, middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump on into it, a couple quick links. As many of you may know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. These audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. It was 2005 near Princeton, Minnesota, and a group of 5 friends were eagerly getting ready for a ski trip. They'd been planning this trip for months, and they were thrilled that it was finally happening. They were college-age skiers, and they were all very good at the sport. Many of them had been skiing since grade school, and they all had confidence in their abilities on the slopes. It was supposed to be a time when they could relax and hang out with each other before getting back into the throes of college life. The trip was planned to take a few days, with the group leaving for the mountain on a Wednesday and returning following Sunday. But the friends of the group report they never made it back. Mike Carter, whose best friend was the leader of the group of skiers, stated that when he was unable to reach his friend Frank on a Sunday afternoon, he began to worry. The group was supposed to have returned to cell service that morning, and Frank was supposed to check in with Mike to let him know that they had all made it back safely. When he failed to do so, Mike decided to give them a little while longer, just in case they had fallen behind schedule while on the trail, and being a skier himself, he knew just how easy it was to do so. But when the afternoon came and went, and there was still no sign of Frank or any of the other group members, Carter decided it was time to get the authorities involved. He contacted the police and reported his friends missing, and law enforcement sent out a search and rescue team immediately. Mike, being a skier that he was, knew that there was no way he could sit at home and wait and hear what the search team had found. Instead, gathered his gear and made the 2-hour drive up to Princeton to join the search and rescue team himself. With the help of dogs, the group was able to pick up on a trail within a day of arriving on the scene, and within hours they were trudging their way up a mountain on their skis. The trail was too treacherous to take any motorized vehicles, so while helicopters scanned the area from the sky, the men and women on the ground had to search on their own sets of skis. The search party scoured the mountainside as they made their way toward the top, and there were signs the group of skiers had passed by this area. But there was no sign that anything had gone wrong. The team was able to uncover a campsite the group had used, and later were able to see where the group had broken a trail through the snow. There had not been any recent storms in the area, so the search team was able to easily track where the skiers had passed through the snow. Although they were unable to call out in fear of starting an avalanche, there already was a risk of avalanche in the area, and making any unnecessary noise would have even made it worse. The group reached the top of the mountain, and that's when things began to take a turn for the worse. The search and rescue team was able to uncover a campsite the group of friends had clearly used, and they were able to tell that a fire had been burned within the past few days. There was no sign of the skiers, though, Suddenly, the radio signaled to the group, and they could see something further down on the mountain. Though they were unable to make out what it was through the trees, the search team eagerly made their way down the other side, hoping to find the group of skiers and offer assistance to them if they were hurt. Instead, what they found was a horror scene. All the skiers in the group, including Mike's friend Frank, had been brutally attacked and torn apart. Limbs were ripped from their bodies, and the blood staining snow all around. Several of the members in the group had puncture marks on their faces and arms, clearly indicating that they had been bitten. But the search team could see that whatever had bitten them was very large and had large canine-like teeth. The tracks in the snow were even more confusing, however, as it looked as though there was a large dog track, but the dog was walking on two legs. The tracks themselves were over 7 inches across, and the slash marks in the nearby trees indicated that whatever it was had attacked the skiers was at least 7 feet tall. The blood stained the snow, but the search team was still able to find a single tuft of hair that had been caught on one of the skier's poles. They guessed the skier had tried to fend off this creature with its pole, but had been unsuccessful in doing so. Photographs were taken of everything at the scene, including the slash marks on the trees and the paw prints in the snow. The hair was also taken as evidence and sent for forensic investigation. The remains of the skiers were wrapped in plastic and also taken away from the scene, and the families were informed that an accident had occurred. Although a lengthy investigation took place, it is unclear what really attacked the skiers. Authorities closed the case, saying it was likely a timber wolf, but there is still many questions that remain unanswered. Timber wolves don't slash at their victims with claws, and a timber wolf wouldn't dismember a victim. While they are large animals, they aren't large enough to leave marks 7 feet on a tree either. There is little doubt that this group of skiers was attacked by a wolf, but a timber wolf certainly not. Now, after I first read this experience, I immediately looked it up and couldn't find anything on it. I reached out to my uncle, who is former law enforcement, and asked him if he had any way of getting any information to, really verify this. What he did tell me was there was an attack on skiers that by an unknown creature. That was what was stated. It was not a wolf. And that it did happen in 2005. It just was not in Minnesota. That it happened in a completely different state. And that whoever shared this probably wanted to keep it quiet. That the incident actually took place in Colorado. He thinks that my uncle actually said this word for word. It was probably someone in the search and rescue team or law enforcement community that shared this and didn't want it to come back on anyone who was part of the search and rescue team or law enforcement, so they completely switched states. But the case was more than likely completely buried. But that's all my uncle could find out for me. And yeah, he's the one that was involved in the search for Tom Mezek. And we all know that things can really be buried in search and rescue experiences like that. He still doesn't know to this day. No one that I've ever spoken to this day knows why the FBI was involved. Damage control is what I think, but who knows? So I just wanted to share that with you guys. On to tonight's second encounter. It was back in 1998 that my family decided we'd spend Christmas at our vacation home near Anchorage, Alaska. Before I was born, my parents inherited the house because my grandparents decided they no longer wanted to bother with long flights, but we had only ever used it during the summer and occasionally during fall. Our primary residence was in Oregon, but I guess we didn't get much snow during the last few winters, and my mom wanted to ensure we had a white Christmas. They kept the cabin open year-round for vacationers, so there wasn't any kind of hassle other than making the trip up there. I remember being super excited because I loved going there and had never seen it during the winter. My little sister was so ecstatic to head there for Christmas, so she seemed to love the snow even more than I did. And that's saying something. At the time, she was in 3rd grade and I was in 5th. We left for the airport that very afternoon that our winter break began. Of course, none of us had the faintest clue about the awaiting terror. It was late and very dark outside when we arrived. I recall being pretty amazed at how different the place looked during that time of year. Right away, it felt like such a different experience from what I was used to. The first thing I did was help my dad start a fire. The cabin had this massive fireplace that was closer to the center of the structure. In addition to the charming aesthetic, I think the purpose of putting it there was to encourage a more evenly distributed heat throughout the living space. It's still one of the few homes where I've seen anything like it. Mom had just made hot chocolate, and the 4 of us were gathered in the front of the fire when we heard something very odd. It sounded like a man hollering, just like a large mammal, like a deer or a moose squealing out in pain. Shortly after that, we heard the noise of a small stampede making its way through the snow near the house. I was the first to get up and rush over to the window. I was barely quick enough to catch the sight of a couple of large deer prancing in the woods. I'm almost positive it was a herd of deer, but I suppose it could have been elk. Soon my dad arrived at my side. We waited for a minute to see if whatever had frightened them may appear, but no luck. I think we assumed it must have been a human hunter, but my dad commented on how it was kind of weird that we didn't hear a gunshot, and why a man would have shouted right before his attack. Had he snuck up on his prey in the snow and killed it with a knife? Regardless, my mom and sister thought it was pretty disturbing that anything like that happened so close to our home. Still excited about coming to the cabin, we managed to disregard the odd happening and headed off for bed. It was a few mornings later that we woke up to even more snow. Mom worked at preparing a pancake brunch while Dad and I decided to head out on a little cross-country ski adventure. There were many trails around there, and we had a few sets of newer skis that none of us had ever used because they were provided for wintertime renters. It started as a lot of fun, but quickly grew tiring because neither one of us were conditioned for that kind of movement. While Dad and I were taking a break and admiring the view of the frozen pond, I began to feel a bit out of whack. And I know my dad started to feel something as well because I remember him suddenly looking around like he heard something that made him a bit uneasy. I hadn't heard a single thing. It was just a feeling in my stomach like something was nagging me to be more alert. The only reason I even remember any of that is because of the other oddities that would follow. After Dad and I made it back to the cabin unharmed, we stepped inside to find my sister curled up on my mom's lap on the sofa, the blankets covering her face. But I still got the impression that she was frightened and maybe even crying. "What's the matter?" my dad said. I could tell Mom was unsure of how to word it. "Some animal scared her," my mom said. "She was building a snow fort behind the house and said this animal came close to her and stared at her." "What did the animal look like?" Dad said while patting Amanda's shoulder. "It was a huge dog," Amanda said. It was easy to tell by her tone that she expected neither one of them to believe her. I wasn't sure what to think because my sister was never one to tell tall tales. I still can't think of a single time. Are you sure it just wasn't like a regular dog? My dad asked. Yes, I'm sure. She had probably just gotten done debating the same thing with my mom soon before we walked in. Although I was a little sketched out by the situation, the skiing had made me hungry that I couldn't take it anymore. I went over to the table and began nibbling. Dad came over and snagged a pancake to eat on his way outside. I'll go have a look around, he said. My sister screamed out, "Don't go out there. It might come back." I couldn't believe how worried she was. Her fear sounded genuine. Even Dad looked surprised, but it probably made him even more curious to find out what was out there. "I'll be okay, I promise," and stepped out the doorway before she could protest any further, and it was evident that she wasn't willing to go anywhere near the doors. "He'll be all right," my mom said, reassuring her, after my sister buried herself underneath the blankets. I wasn't very worried about my dad because he always seemed more capable of looking after himself. It was just hard for me to imagine any animal wanting to attack him for any reason, but when I noticed that he had been out there for more than a few minutes, I walked to the window to check on him. At first I couldn't find him and I became worried, but then relief kicked in when I saw he had come back into view. It looked like he had been kneeling just beyond the forest line in our backyard. Although his body language didn't hint that there was any reason for panic, it was clear that he was examining something. What did he come across, I thought. I was the first person to ask Dad what he found when he came back in, but he seemed dismissive. It wasn't until maybe an hour later that I overheard him talking with my mom while my sister was in the bathroom. It then occurred to me that he didn't answer my question because he didn't want my sister to overhear him saying anything that would make her even more upset. I didn't get all the details, but I did hear a part where he had found some very odd-looking tracks in the snow. I remember specifically my mom asking, "Large boot tracks?" My dad responded with a no, but didn't sound too worried, though, and it was probably because he wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. I bet the last thing he wanted to believe was that there was something out there. I also heard him mention that he had gotten to a certain point in the snow and lost sight of the tracks, so maybe he decided there was a chance he was looking for Amanda's stride marks from when she was frolicking through the yard. That must have been what he was examining before I saw him raise to his feet and start walking back. Otherwise, where would whoever have stepped into and disappeared to? Again, the only reason he didn't want to talk about it was Amanda. While I looked through the windows, there was nothing in sight. So what would be the point of getting her all worked up again if there was no threat? Because the coast appeared clear, I decided to have a look myself. When I got out there, I instantly saw what Dad was telling Mom. The first weird thing I noticed was how the tracks seemed so wide apart from one another. It looked as though whatever it was leapt one step in front of the other until they disappeared. But it was then that I realized there were a few trees very close to where the tracks had stopped. I felt evident that whatever was responsible for making those tracks had possibly climbed or jumped into one of the trees. I looked up and couldn't see anything, but I suppose there's always the possibility that something could have hidden behind a pine and snow or somehow blended in. In my opinion, the tracks didn't seem to come from anything enormous. They appeared to be, about the size of my feet, which was a size 7 at the time, in boots. "How about you come back inside?" Dad called out for me from the doorway. He sounded a little concerned, but he didn't give any explanation regarding why. I did ask. Once I made it inside, I didn't bother saying anything about the tracks because I noticed my sister was in the room, and I loved this cabin. But it kind of sucked how it didn't allow for privacy. If you didn't want someone to hear you saying something, you pretty much have to wait until that person was in the bathroom and turned on the shower. The only other way you could possibly get around it was to whisper. A couple of nights later, the four of us were playing a board game by the fire when it began to snow really hard out. And it only seemed to pick up as the night went on. Eventually, it caked the windows to the point where you could barely see anything outside, even with the lights on. It made things cozy, but the feeling went away as we all paused our chatter to listen to some noises on our roof. It sounded like something very heavy was running back and forth across it. After listening for a few seconds, my sister ran over and buried her face in my mom's shoulder. "It's that monster dog, I just know it," she squealed. By this point, I was pretty much uneasy. I was thinking about my recent theory on how the thing had made tracks and potentially jumped or climbed into the pine trees. Whatever might have done that would have had no problem climbing onto the roof of this modest-sized cabin. But what is this thing? The house had an A-frame roof, and whatever was moving around up there seemed to have no problem with it. It must have gone from one side to the other and back in at least a handful of times. After listening for a couple of minutes, the noise stopped. I don't remember how long it had stopped for, but it was long enough to where we felt it was okay to begin talking again. But then it sounded like two large people started wrestling on top of the roof and sliding down one side of it. I say it sounded like men instead of animals because it was clear they were arguing about something. We were all so shocked and frightened, none of us were willing to raise from our seats. Dad gathered the courage to open the door and shouted for whoever is out there to scram. That was when everything got quiet again. Although his position didn't provide him with an angle to see what was up there, he would later tell me that he heard loud panting noises. Something like that of an exhausted dog would make on a hot summer's day. Other than that, there was no response. Another strange thing was how we didn't even hear anything that would indicate animals leaving the area. And whatever they were, they sounded huge. Why would my dad shouting be enough to intimidate them and even break up their fighting? I have no way to determine how that's precisely how it all played out, but it sure seemed like that. I didn't sleep much that night because all I could think about was how the animals may come back and even break into our cabin. I still wonder whether we might have left before Christmas if there hadn't been so much snow causing us to stay put. My parents allowed my sister to sleep on the floor beside their bed the rest of the trip. Oddly enough, we never saw or heard any signs of the animals returning to the property, and aside from lingering feelings of fear, we were able to have a pretty decent Christmas. Since I never saw the creatures myself, I'm unable to verify what exactly it was. But my sister insists on the case. There's no single doubt in her mind that it was a werewolf that approached her the day she was building her snow fort all those years back. Nowadays, she's far more comfortable discussing the whole thing. I mean, she has a lot of time to come with terms with reality of it all. I actually asked her first if she wanted to write this down, but she declined, claiming that I would do a better job. She's now a lawyer and a mother of 4 kids, so I certainly understand that she does not have any free time. My parents never received any notices from the renters about seeing or hearing anything unusual. However, a vacation rental agency handling all the bookings, so I suppose there was a chance that they just disregarded any claims just so the cash would continue to flow. I think about our situation quite often, and sometimes my mind attempts to convince itself that I imagined the whole thing as well. It might even been successful in doing so if there hadn't been 3 other trustworthy people to verify my memory. Sometimes you have no choice other than to accept the mysteries of life. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this early morning, middle of the night bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.